well, and I don't want to make it 30% bigger because it will cease to be such a good school. So, an effort at an answer.
Paul, maybe we can get your thoughts.
Sure. Two very quick points. We shouldn't allow new buildings whose acoustics disadvantage the pupils. It's mad. Looking at the range of options and issues raised, I just agree with Graham that ultimately it's about the quality of the teacher, and that most of our resources should be going into. We've got great teachers. We've got teachers who aren't up to it and they shouldn't be there, but we've got a big lot of teachers in between who want to be better, and we've got to find ways of getting resources into the classroom to that teacher to be able to deliver as well as they want to, which I think they do.
Would you like to add anything?
I'd just like to add, I'm going to pick up on 2 points actually that Bruce made. First of all, just to reiterate in response to your question, to reiterate that I don't think that we should necessarily be deciding exactly what size every school should be. I'm not sure that should necessarily be something that we're worrying too much about. But shelving schools into a shiny new building is not going to sort out the problems. I mean, I think that's just something you keep hearing again and again from this panel. But the second thing that I would say is that we've now heard a couple of times about how excited kids are when they get into a new building, and yes, I'm sure that's true, and yes, teachers are excited as well. But I think there's probably a pretty big question mark hanging over how long that impact lasts for.
Very good. 2 more questions? Gentleman right here, and then gentleman right there, if you'd like to.
Thank you. I'm a counsellor in Tameside, Greater Manchester, and we're building an academy. And this academy is going to comprise of 1,500 people. That's students and, of course, the ancillary staff as well. It's going to be an enormous. It's actually difficult to imagine how people are even going to be dropped off in the morning on the street where it is. Well, my largest concern is this seems to have followed the American form of larger and larger schools. And what we've seen increasingly in America is people taking guns and kill their school friends. And I'm genuinely concerned, although it hasn't really happened in this country yet, if you have an organisation which is so big, you alienate people. And you have people like the gentleman in America last year who just could not cope with what was happening in his life and decided to end his and other people's lives. I do not think that is the future for the schools that I would like to see.
Wow.
Okay. Indeed, not much of a question, but still a very important issue indeed. Aidan, if you'd like to.
Yeah, Anna, you asked for a response on ICT, so the quick one, there was a very large study called the Impact 2 study across 29 local authorities, which showed on average where ICT is used well, it was about half a GCSE grade difference between one of those schools and where it's not used well. But I think what we're getting a bit mixed up is separating ICT from good teaching and good teachers. So if you focus on the point about good teachers being important, what most good teachers will now ask for is the technology they need to do their job well. And that's all it is. It's not some fancy thing that's an extra twiddly bit that the kids do wonderful, amazing work on, which they sometimes do. It's actually an aid to good teaching these days where it's used well. And we would back you up on the training points. I think on average from our experience, only 20% of schools use it well. There is a misunderstanding of its purpose and what it's for. Where it's used well, it's excellent. We do need more training of those training. So I'd certainly back you up on that point. But there is a misnomer that it's not helpful, it is.
Very good. Really questions for us to respond to, unfortunately. Maybe we could try a gentleman here and then the gentleman at the back there. Sorry if I'm ignoring other people going.
I'm Tony Breslin, I'm Chief Executive of the Citizenship Foundation, we're an independent education charity. I grew up a couple of streets from Capital City Academy, and you're absolutely right there. It seems to me that what's coming across both from the comments on the floor and from the panel is that we concentrate on rebuilding schools and not rethinking schools. And if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And yes, it's nicer if the materials are better and the roof is better, but the impact will be short-lived. And it seems to me that what we should have been using this as an opportunity to do, and we should recommit to it and we should do it in this way, to say this is not just a conversation, well, let's make it a conversation itself, but this is not just a programme of rebuilding schools. It's about thinking about the purpose of the school, what we need these schools to be doing over at least the next 25 years. And of course we can't see all of that, but we ought to be trying to see some of it. What's teaching and learning going to be like? What kind of facilities are teachers going to need? How's the school going to work as a hub in the community? And if we think about building buildings, and that's actually happened at the capital city academy, where the building really takes on a place in the community, then you can guarantee you build much stronger parental links with the place and everything else. But if this is kept as a building project, it will only be nice and shiny and not have the impact. And it's just a plea to really, not simply rebuild, but rethink schools.
A plea there, again, not a question. Gentleman in black, please.
Sorry.
You've lost control.
I have, it's gone. Questions, please.
It might come to a question. Ian,
Oh,
I'm
God.
a member of Evening Council for Children's Services. We're in the middle of a BSF procurement process at the moment, some 300 million quid going into our schools, which is going to be great. I'm sure we're going to get a new school, we're going to get a lot of new buildings, it'll be great. But what's keeping me awake at night is my primary is the massive birth rate increase in going on in the borough. I've got hundreds and hundreds of kids coming through that I've got no school places for. I need something like 20 forms of entry in the next 2 years. That's equivalent to what, 2 form entry primary schools. Yet the government, they announced a £200 million for this to deal with this problem. We filled in the spreadsheet, sent it back. They said we owe the government 8 million quid. So I've now got a sort of 50, 60, 70 million, who knows, pound black hole at primary. 200 million quid going into secondary, but a huge gap there. What do I do with these kids? Do I shove them into porta cabins on playgrounds and say, don't worry, your education is going to be transformed when you get to 11, but in the meantime you go to summer. Is there any hope you can offer us to get a bit of flexibility in how the capital is used?
So there's a bit of meat to get onto there, Graham, maybe you could respond to.
Well, absolutely. We've got to respond to need, and that's, again, this fixation of delivering the sort of politicians' targets. And I do hope there'll be a change if there's a change in government. We'll see, because we have a 24-hour media, and it's quite hard. I mean, if the football team kicks its way to the top, then other teams will start to kick too. And whether we can wean ourselves away from the need to try and capture the Sunday papers headlines this coming week and go in and just do the long, hard slog of listening and understanding and hearing different problems in different places and different solutions in different places, and not come out and announce I'm the new minister and I'm going to promise X thousand of something, which is going to be done everywhere because I've said so, because it makes me look good. We need to be a lot humbler and dully managerial in many ways, if we're to ensure that we allocate resources to where it's most needed. And it's frightening to see these palaces going up in one place, and then you wander into this school, which, thanks to Ty, has got a breath of fresh air and a bit of a paint today. But otherwise, you would not believe how run down it is looking. And it has got, also picking up your point, it's got 350 pupils now, and it's expecting to have 400 shortly and 450 because there is an explosion in birth rates around, and it's had phoned up the hospital locally, and to hear it was even higher than the council had previously taken on board. So there's zillions of kids coming forward into these rundown schools while everybody's on this fixed, procured, heavily expensive, overrun, filled BSF programme, every one of which spends as much on procurement for each school as enough to buy a brand new state-of-the-art primary school, and that just goes on the procurement costs. It's deeply depressing, and I really hope we will be able to unpick it and act more sensibly.
Bruce, would you like to add to anything? I'm quite entertained by the idea of a humble Conservative MP.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not a civil servant in the Department for Children, Schools and Families when I hear what you say about what you've been told in Ealing, because the answer that I would have given until 10 months ago is that there's a pot of money to deal with exactly the eventuality that you've described, and that you should bid for it and that you'll get it. So if you're not getting it, I go back and ask again, and if you still get a no, then I get your MPs onto it, and I would garner together whatever support you can, because you ought to get it, and the government says you should get it.
Well, it's only 200 million quid. I mean, we're spending over 90 million in Ealing. That's one London borough. You know, they've got a pot that's twice that amount for the whole country.
No, I'm talking about your primary places. You're not going to spend £200 million on primary places.
We're
Sure.
spending £90 million on primary places.
Yeah. There's a pot of money.
Would you like to add anything?
I'd like to ask a quick question, just to demonstrate to the audience how it is done.
Well, we have one here as well.
I'd like to just ask Graham how much money Ty is paying him, because you're managing to reference him in every single answer that you give. And secondly, I'd just like to, sorry, that's just a joke, Ty.
It's a good issue though, and I might raise it with him later.
Secondly, I'd just like to pretend that you asked a question, and in response to the pretend question, I